I'm Catherine Arndt, the Chief of the VLGA Connect Studio. Welcome to today's episode, brought to you by the VLGA, your councillor support network and the national broadcaster on all things local government.
Hi everyone, it's time for TGU, the governance update from VLGA Connect for yet another week, sponsored by Hunt and Hunt Lawyers. Julie Reid is back with me. Hello Julie, how are you this week?
Hi, Chris. Really well. I've had a really busy week, and just a big shout out to the staff at Maribyrnong, who I've spent
Oh, good.
quite a bit of time with this week. So it's been great to engage with them.
And we've got a ring in, somebody new on the panel
I
today.
know.
It says Tony Rownick on the screen, but it looks a bit different to the Tony we're used to. Tony, is that you?
Come back with a bit of holiday facial hair. Not sure how long it will last, Chris, Julie, and viewers. But yeah, I've got the holiday cap from Croatia on. But
nice.
Missed you all so much.
Oh.
But what an awesome job Nick Miller did for me, and I really appreciate it. And but you know, back in the office all this week, and back to working with regional, rural, and metro councils already this week, and been out to Mary Beck. We spent some time with the councillors on Wednesday evening, been with Wyndham staff this week. Lots of things happening, and
you have hit the ground running.
Second half of the year in local government, everyone. Exciting.
Well, we missed you, Tony. Nick did a great job, but it is great to have you back. And I think I'll run a poll on Twitter, if there's anyone still on Twitter, on Tony's facial hair, whether he should keep it or not. We'll see if we can get a groundswell of public support, Tony.
Be gentle, be gentle.
Is there any truth
Tony, we're still excited to hear about your adventures and what you learnt over there and what we could do better in local government over here. I'm sure you've got loads to share with us.
Oh, I went to so many places. You know, the Hotel de Ville in France is not a hotel, everyone. It's the town hall. I was with, I won't say which member of my family kept saying, oh, these Hotel de Villes are always in a really good central spot. I said, that's the town hall.
Well, you learn something every day. And of course, we saw some nice pics out of Tuscany where you managed to put your feet up for a bit, did you?
I got chased by a wild boar in Tuscany, but I did love it. Had a lovely time.
And what about the Tour de France? Were you there for that, Tony?
I saw the Giro d'Italia, the women's Giro d'Italia ride past me. I got to watch it. I'm a bit of a keen cyclist through Sirmione on Lago di Garda near Milan. And that was pretty special. And women's road cycling is just grown exponentially, and it's a major event. Huge crowds.
Yeah.
So watch out, councils. Tony's bringing his bike. Make sure you've got those bike racks ready to go.
And we're going to hang it up somewhere in one of the council offices. Yeah.
and impressing us with his pronunciations there too, I noticed, Tony. Now, is there any truth to the rumour that you adjusted your itinerary to make sure you were back for the office end of financial year party?
It could be true. I might have had a bit of help with the speech. I didn't really know. I dialed in quite a bit on various things, and of course, management things you've got to continue to do, and even firework. I managed to talk to a number of council staff, even councillors, from exotic locations at weird times of day and night for me, but. Yes, I was back, and
rest for the wicked.
Great to spend some time with the crew at Hunt and Hunt on Friday night.
Now, I think this show's all about talking about local government, isn't it?
Apparently,
possibly. We should get onto it.
That.
What's coming up today? We've got a likely suspension looming for Liverpool Council in Sydney as a public inquiry has been announced this week. There's been a misconduct finding against a councillor at Port Phillip. The on-again, off-again filming of The Block in Daylesford is back on. We'll talk about that. And a controversy over a proposal to change a council's Acknowledgement of Country has made some news this week. But we're going to start with very sad news. This broke last Friday after we'd recorded our show. The passing of Councillor Rod Fife, OAM, 38 years, a councillor at the City of Greater Bendigo, passed away while in office. Very sad news indeed, and the tributes have flowed since that time, including a statement from the Victorian Premier and others. Julie, Rod touched a lot of people around the sector. He was part of it for so long.
He did, Chris, and it's very sad to hear about his passing. He was affectionately known as the mayor with the hair.
Mm.
So if you don't remember who he was, you might remember now when I mention that. Very, very sad to hear of his passing. Earlier this week, the council did release a statement that that he had made, reflecting on his recollections of local government. And he basically said it had been a great honour and privilege to serve as a councillor for the wonderful community of Bendigo for 38 years. He was the councillor for Sutton Ward, and his main interests were in preserving both his heritage buildings and the environment there in Sutton Ward. He said, when I first started on council, 1/3 of councillors had to stand down at each election. I remember when I walked into the council chamber for the first time, the staff were putting out ashtrays for the councillors who were smokers. So he had a good sense of humour, and he reflected on some of the fun that they had at the time. It was interesting, though. He quickly learnt that the role of council is so much more than the 3 Rs: roads, rates, and rubbish.
Yeah.
And I've been proud to help steer 38 budgets that have strived to strike the right balance between the must-haves and the nice-to-haves. I thought that was a really, really important message that he put out. Lots more. You can have a look at it on the Greater Bendigo website. What a legend to be in local government for that long, and to have such leave such a legacy on the local community. So we say Vale Councillor Rod Fyfe, OAM, and we send all our best wishes to his family.
Yeah, Mayor 4 times, I believe. Deputy Mayor a couple of other times as well. Tony, your paths would have crossed, no doubt.
We did. He, I think every, particularly in the regions, every town, every regional city needs a Rod Fyfe, and he was just so involved in the community for so many years, and the Bendigo Art Gallery, the Golden Point Footy Club, these sort of, his passions were about community, and made a huge impact on the community, but a very modest man as well. So his legacy will go on in Bendigo for many generations to come. Some of the things that he helped create and was involved in over those 38 years.
As the Premier Jacinda Allen said, it's not every councillor that passes on that gets a statement from the Premier, but of course Jacinda Allen, the local member there for a long time, and they've worked very closely. And here's a couple of Jacinda's comments. He was renowned for his big smile and his even bigger head of hair. And Jacinda said, whenever I see the warm sunlight filter through the domes of Bendigo Art Gallery, I know I'll be reminded of Rod. Very nice words. So all of those links are there online if you'd like to read a bit more about that. And we'd obviously pass on our thoughts and best wishes to all of Rod's family, friends and colleagues after his sad passing last week. Let's move on with some more local government news. And we've had another arbiter decision released this week. It was tabled at the City of Port Phillip earlier in the week. This is a misconduct finding from Arbiter Yehudi Blaisher against Councillor Robbie Niagwe. And Tony, the old social media rearing its head again here.
I was going to say, take a wild guess what forum, the problematic comments might be made in. And as you say, Chris, Facebook posts this time by Councillor Niagwe on the 4th of February 2024, which coincided with the annual Midsummer Pride March. Look, I won't read the comments in depth. They were concerning comments, but would have had an impact on various councillors. But just to give you a flavour, the post started, "Dear Port Phillip rainbow friends and family, beware fair weather friends. They love to play with rainbows, but disappear when it rains." And Robbie, Councillor Niagwe, went on to talk about how he was marching that day in the Midsummer Pride March other councillors would be marching too, but he said that 3 of those councillors were essentially these fair weather friends, and incorrectly, and it was admitted by all the parties at the arbitration that these comments were incorrect, factual incorrect. He claimed that that 3 councillors, councillors Bond, Clark, and Sirikov, had voted against the LGBTIQA plus action plan, and that they had also supported the cancellation of a drag story time event in Port Phillip. And as I say, agreed by Councillor Nyagai and his and the applicants at the arbiter hearing, that those comments were in fact incorrect. And the arbiter Shouty Blaisher found that the comments on Facebook were abusive, disrespectful, naturally misleading the public as to the views of the applicants, and also that they had the potential to incite others to cause physical harm to the applicants, and something we need to be aware of, that our statements mightn't intend to do those things, but have the capacity sometimes to do that. A really interesting element I found is in the sanctions that Councillor Blaisher ordered. Of course, a public apology to be made at a council meeting. I think that may well have been made this week. A public apology on Facebook. Of course, deletion of the offending posts. Councillor Nyagai to undertake training on the appropriate use of social media. And get this one, Julie and Chris, really interesting sanction. And I'll quote from the last paragraph of the arbiter decision, referring to Councillor Nyagai, that he make no other posting on social media about council matters until the mayor is satisfied he understands how to use such platforms consistent with his councillor obligations. So,
Wow.
you know, in a not many months before a council election, I'm not sure if Councillor Nyagai is actually running or not, but you know, he's been told he's not to make any comment about council on any social media platform until the current mayor at Port Phillip is satisfied that he understands his obligations as a councillor in that respect. So a lot of responsibility placed on the mayor there, a lot of, I guess, faith and trust placed on the mayor there. I'm not doubting that will be handled appropriately, but an interesting decision. You know, there is some politics there, one might imagine. And we'll see how that plays out over forthcoming months, and how long that practical prohibition, if you like, against Councillor Nyagai making comments lasts for.
That is really interesting, Tony, when you think through that, when you think through potentially, you know, I don't know what the political affiliations of Councillor Nyagai and the mayor are. I don't know how long that's expected to take, but you can imagine concerns about the length of time, whether it's too short, too soon, the pressure that places on the mayor to get that right, I imagine, is considerable.
Yeah, and it's also interesting from a point of view of the role of the mayor as well. I mean, obviously it is in legislation that the council must adhere, or the councillors must adhere to any direction by an arbiter, don't they, Tony? However,
or it's serious misconduct.
Yeah, that's right.
That's
right. So the mayor has no choice but to undertake that role. So, because normally would the mayor have the power to be able to do that? Well, no. You know, it's not normally the mayor's role to do that. But because it's a direction from an arbiter, then
really interesting, isn't it?
Must deliver on that direction. So, no getting out of that one.
He's a very experienced arbiter, Shouty Blaisher, as well as, you know, in your local government. Seems to get some of the, you know, particularly, you know, interesting cases as well. I think there's a lot of faith shown in him by local government Victoria. So again, I don't think that he would have gone off on a a wild tangent here. I think it would have been a thought through sanction, but will be the first time I've seen something like this. So I'd be
Yeah,
interested to see how
we
it
might
plays
see
out.
more of it too, particularly if there's more arbitration cases between now and the election. So,
Yes, I
will be
wonder how many
interesting.
more are in the pipeline between now and elections, because as we get closer, obviously they're going to become so much more political in the way they're interpreted, aren't they?
Yeah,
Well,
aren't
there's
they?
quite a few
Mm.
that are in the process. Whether they the outcome, is known before the election is something else. But yeah,
Mm,
there's a lots underway. I think
mm,
generally we're seeing almost every week, aren't we?
Yeah.
We're seeing
mm.
seeing one these days.
Unfortunately, yes, you're right. All
Yeah.
right. So that decision was published in a supplementary agenda by the City of Port Phillip on its website this week. It was an addition to their meeting that they had, I
Yeah, and
think,
sorry
on
for
Wednesday night.
mispronouncing Councillor
Well, I don't know that
Niagi's name.
I don't know that you're wrong, but I have heard it pronounced in media as Niagui, so that's what I'm going with. But that could have been wrong. It might be when I first saw it, I thought it was Niagai. So
Yeah,
perhaps someone can help us
yeah.
with that. But I think it's Councillor Niagui. All right. We've got this block decision back on again in Daylesford at Hepburnshire. So a quick recap here. The block sort of announced, I think, last year that they were going to Daylesford. It might have been earlier this year for the next series. They ended up going to Phillip Island because there were objections and the process was being dragged out. The Shire, as I understand it, Tony, approved the application with conditions, but that was appealed by residents. It went to VCAT, but the minister stepped in to award the permit for them to come and do their show in Daylesford.
That's a great summary and a really a controversial decision locally. Support for the block coming in from traders, people who'd like to see some some injection into the local economy, but concerns about and understandable concerns about the impact this might have on what is a unique sort of township. And if Daylesford, the Daylesford markets near where the steam train heads off towards Musk, Bellato. That's Raglan Street, and there's a large roundabout where the Farmers Arms Hotel is on one point and Mitre 10 on another, and I think a livestock pet food feed place on another. And then there's this large block of land, real gateway site on this roundabout that you have the road to Trentham, the road to Castlemaine on the roundabout, and really prominent site. Councillor Brian Hood, the Mayor of Hepburn, has come out looking at the positives and said, look, looking forward to the boost to the local economy, encouraging that Channel 9 production team, which must be a huge team, folks, to eat, shop, invest in the local economy. But look, I think it's coming up to the 21st season of the block. I'm not a big fan of reality TV. I reckon I'll watch this one in 2025, given my connections to Daylesford and that Hepburn community, and there'll be a national spotlight on that area.
So the current series, I think, is Phillip Island. Has that been to air yet, or is that about to go to air? I'm not sure, but they've
I don't
certainly
think it's gone to air yet. I
Okay,
don't
so
think
it must
so.
be coming pretty soon, because they've talked about the positive impact, or the producers of the show have talked about the positive impact it's had down there. Yet to see any comment out of Phillip Island on whether that's the case or not, but let's hope that is the case also for Daylesford next year. All right, guys, we'll pause the panel for a moment and head off to our regular VLGA snapshot with Reece, and we'll come back and talk about what's happening interstate, particularly at the city of Liverpool, which is subject to a public inquiry announced this week and a likely suspension. Back with more soon. Time to bring in Reece Thomas in the VLGA studio for this week's segment, which we're calling Call and Response. Hello, Reece.
G'day, Chris. How are you?
Going well. What about you?
Busy. We just launched our local Women Leading Change handbook today, and
Yep.
yeah, it was a big effort to get us that far.
Great to hear about that. Of course, you gave us the heads up on that last week. You also mentioned that the councillor census was coming, and I think you've got some early indications that you can share with us. Where are we at with that process?
Yeah, well, we put out a call to councillors across Victoria, as you know, and we've got a response back now from many of them. In fact, about a third of Victoria's councillors have already responded.
Great.
And the census is going to be open throughout July, so there's still plenty of time for councillors to do that, and we'll be sending out some reminders in the next little bit to keep the momentum going.
So, how big a task is this for the participants? What sort of information are you trying to collect from them?
Well, we ask it first of all. We just ask a number of demographic questions, things just to get a picture of the councillor cohort. So things like age and gender, Aboriginality, employment status, education level, whether or not they have care or responsibilities, and that helps us paint a bit of a picture of councillors, so we can begin to understand whether there's any underrepresented groups in the councillor cohort. We also ask them about their motivations to become councillors. Why did they stand for office in the first place? What were the areas of priority? And how equipped did they feel when they actually got elected? And then we get a little bit further into the areas where those new councillors who started back in 2020, what areas would they have felt that they would have benefited from more training and more support? And what areas surprised them when they're elected, perhaps things they didn't know about.
Are you also asking them if they're going to stand again based on the experience that they've had thus far?
We do ask them that, and that will be quite interesting because we ask some questions about their actual experience as a councillor. So questions like, did they have as much influence as they thought they would? Was the role more strategic or more operational than they thought? And so by comparing those sorts of things, we can begin to understand how that impacts a councillor's decision to put their hand up for a second or subsequent term. And of course, we rely on people to be a little bit candid in those responses, and that's why the whole census is anonymous, and we don't actually even ask for councillors to identify themselves or the council that they represent.
I can see this will be useful, Reece, to get a sense of whether the expectation of the role was matched by the actual experience, because you delve into that a bit, don't you?
We do, and that's really important for us to understand because, of course, as councillors leading Victoria's leading councillor support network, the VLGA does a lot of training for councillors and a lot of training and support for potential councillors through the candidate information session. So we need to be able to give people as accurate a picture as possible. But we've got some data back.
Right.
Now, I said we've got a third of councillors, and so this is very much preliminary data and will obviously be updated when the work is finalised. But
so you're going to share some of that with us,
I'll give you a bit of a taste of it.
Great.
We know that the average age of councillors is about 58. So it's obviously much older than the average age of Victorian population. And now, admittedly, you're not allowed to be a councillor if you're a child, but you're certainly allowed to be a councillor once you're 18. So 58 is a sort of an older cohort. I can tell you that roughly a quarter of Victoria's councillors work full-time. So for candidates, and quarter work part-time. So for potential candidates who are weighing up whether or not they can balance the role of a councillor with their employment responsibilities, the answer to that is, well, 50% of Victoria's councillors do work full-time or part-time, and there's another group that work in various other ways or run businesses. So the answer is very much you can do that. About half of our councillors are university qualified, which of course means that the other half are not. So it's not a requirement that you have that higher level of education. And about half of our female councillors have children at home. For male councillors, it's about a third. So there's plenty of councillors who are able to juggle work, family responsibilities with their community contribution by becoming a councillor.
In a perfect world, Reece, the makeup of a council would reflect the demographic makeup of the community, wouldn't it? So this is going to give you a really good snapshot of how close to representing the community that cohort is.
It will, and of course, the better the picture, the more accurate that snapshot can be, which is why we're putting out a bit of a call to some councillor groups that we know by looking at the responses are underrepresented in our sample. So I can tell you we're reaching out particularly to councillors from large shires. So that's rural areas, the larger rural shires. We're slightly underrepresented in that space in our sample at the moment. Men from metropolitan cities. We need a few more male councillors from Melbourne to complete the census. Women from small shires. So they're a slightly underrepresented group. And any younger councillors, particularly those aged under 30 that haven't completed the census yet, we'd love to hear from them.
When you've got all this together, Rhys, you've shared some of it with us today, but the intent, I think, is to expose this data more broadly in a public sense.
We will. We'll be providing a public report, and obviously the VLGA will be using it, but I would imagine that the sector more broadly will be using it. There won't obviously be data at the individual council level because we haven't asked people what council they're from, but we will be able to break it up into groups like metropolitan councils, interface councils, large and rural small councils, and regional councils. So there will be some granular data available there. And it's really up to the sector itself to determine how it uses it. Even the very key question, like how much time does a councillor have to spend to be a councillor? Most of us, when we're quoting that figure, are relying on research that was done more than 5 years ago. And so this will give us an indication for that question, at least, whether or not that's changed.
Are you hoping stakeholders like the Minister for Local Government Victoria would take this data on board as they develop policy and make decisions that affect the sector?
Look, I would hope so. And that's one of the reasons why we ask some particular questions about incivility and the sort of behaviours that councillors find themselves subjected to and where that comes from, because that's obviously front of mind for all of us at the moment. So I'm assuming and very much hopeful that that data will be able to inform some improvements for councillors in that space.
Speaking of assumptions, I've worked with councillors for a long time, Rhys. I can't imagine they're just participating and not giving you some feedback on the survey itself. Are you getting some suggestions about it?
Look, we certainly are, and we're really happy about that, actually, because the 2024 census is really just the start of our project. We're going to be rolling the census out again with the new councillors in 2025 and capturing the beginning of what will become a time series. So as time passes, we'll have more and more data sets. So for all the feedback and suggestions about improvements to methodology, framing questions differently, approaching the councillors differently, we're really keen to receive all of that because it will just make the census better over time.
So how much time have they got left if they haven't completed this thus far?
Well, it'll be open throughout July, so up until the 31st of July. We'll send out a couple more reminders, which include the individual link for the councillors to complete it. And so if I leave you with one parting message, it's for those councillors that haven't yet done the census. Can I please ask that you do so? Because if you're planning to retire in October, this will be your last opportunity really to have a say and make a contribution to the sector. And if you're planning to go around again, then your contribution may well make a meaningful difference to your experience as a councillor.
All right. I look forward to seeing how that all comes out in the wash, as they say. You talked about a great event today with the local Women Leading Change event, but you had an equally special event earlier in the week, I believe, Rhys.
I did. I really had the honour of attending on behalf of the VLGA the launch of the Treaty Authority. So the Treaty Authority is an independent body established to oversee treaty negotiations between the First Peoples and the state of Victoria. And essentially the Treaty Authority is an independent umpire that will sort of help navigate treaty-related disputes that might arise, either between the First Peoples or the government or between different traditional owner groups. So it's independent of government and it's going to be a pretty critical part of that ongoing treaty process. And it's got the support of all levels of, or all parties in the Victorian government. And it was a pretty moving event. And I want to thank the Treaty Authority for inviting the VLGA to their launch, because that was a recognition, I think, of the important role of local government in that process. Because as we undertake treaty negotiations into the future, local governments will have an opportunity and will be invited to participate in some of those discussions, and obviously will be an important part of that process.
On that importance, I do note, and a shout out to Banyule City Council, they this week adopted what they're calling one of the state's first Aboriginal self-determination strategies adopted by a council. So kudos to them, and they've mentioned this treaty process as being an important factor in those considerations, Reece. So you'd welcome that, I'm sure, and more to happen across the sector.
Absolutely.
Now, before we go, we've got some upcoming events you want to give us a quick plug for.
Yeah, and in fact, one of them, I was reflecting on it actually at the Treaty Authority launch, because a lot of the critical commentary of the treaty process that you see on social media and even in some of the mainstream media is kind of founded on a little bit of misunderstanding of that process, or even in some cases a deliberate sort of mischaracterization of what will be involved. And so the VLGA's next global executive panel, which I know you're looking forward to hosting, is going to look at the changing nature of elections, with the particular focus on the rise of misinformation online and the role of technology and artificial intelligence in the democratic process. So these are very new factors in elections, and it's a fast-moving space. So the VLGA, we've pulled together a great panel, including Andrea Carson, who's a professor of political communication in the Department of Politics, Media and Philosophy at La Trobe University, and Ian McCormack from Canada, who's the president of Strategic Steps Incorporated in Alberta. So he's got significant experience working with municipal councils over there. So that's coming up in the next couple of weeks. So people should find out all the details for the VLGA Global Executive Panel and register on the VLGA website.
Yeah, I think people are still grappling with time zones at the moment, aren't we, to try and nail down the right time for that event. So
it's always a juggle with these executive panels, so I can't tell you exactly what time and day it's going to be, but the information will be online as soon as we have it.
Excellent. So take that as a coming soon from the VLGA. Thanks, Reece. Great to chat as always, and I can't wait to see what you've got for us next week.
No, I see you then.
Another very insightful piece there from Reece Thomas. Really looking forward to those continuing here on TGU. Team, we've got some interstate news to talk about. Firstly, let's head across to Adelaide briefly. An appointment of a CEO there with a Victorian connection, Michael Sedgman, who's been acting in the role since Claire Mockler left late last year for family reasons, has been confirmed as the permanent CEO. I think, Tony, this goes back to Yarra days. You might have had some crossing of paths with Michael there.
Yeah, I certainly remember him. I think he had a strategic planning type role at the city of Yarra, and would still be, people with long memories would who've been in local government for a while would remember Michael. And of course, has had an impressive career in local government in South Australia since. And he's currently in an acting role, as you say, at the City of Adelaide, and an announcement by the Lord Mayor Jane Lomax Smith this week that Michael's assuming that the top job for CEOs in South Australia. So well done. I'm sure he'll make a great contribution.
And he's had a nice mix of state government experience as well, I believe, Chris. So he's worked for the Department of Planning, Transport and Infrastructure. I assume that's South Australia that after he moved there. But he's also been the Chief Operating Officer and the Chief Executive Officer of rural city of Murray Bridge from 2015 to 2023. So he's actually a fellow of the Governance Institute of Australia, and she's got a Bachelor of Commerce and a Master of Business Administration and a Master of Commercial Law. So he comes very well qualified. And it's great that he's had roots back in Melbourne, in Yarra, as a strategic planner. Look, fantastic appointment. They're obviously really stoked with his appointment. The mayor had said he is passionate about local government as well as our city, and has a strong connection with our staff. So that's really nice to hear.
It's nice to see the way these careers develop over time in local government, isn't it? There's another great example of coming from humble beginnings to rising to the top position there at Adelaide, which has got some issues at the moment, got to be said. Some interesting issues around the council table. Just news this week of some defamation warnings issued by one councillor against some other councillors. And that councillor is the subject of defamation warnings from the Lord Mayor, which are all playing out quite publicly at the moment. So good luck, Michael, in keeping the ship on track there with those sorts of issues playing out. Even worse, though, in Liverpool in Sydney, which has been subject to lots of conjecture in recent months after the sacking of John Ajaka, the 10th CEO to hold the position either in a permanent or acting form since, I think, 8 years. 10 in 8 years is pretty extraordinary. The local government minister, Ron Honig, launched an investigation in April through the Office of Local Government. They've handed down the interim report this week with some serious findings and a lot more to be dug into as you read that report. And that's resulted in a public inquiry and a potential suspension. Tony, the minister has asked the council to respond within 7 days as to why it should not be suspended.
Yeah, it sounds ominous, doesn't it? And described, I think, in the media or by the minister as a litany of issues there at Liverpool. We couldn't cover them all here, but things like a toxic culture, gender bias in appointments of officers is an allegation. Staff being abused in public by councillors. Allegation of nepotism in appointments of officers, even allegation of excessive pay rates being paid to some senior staff. The mayor, the current mayor, Ned Massoon, has come out and said, oh, look, it's purely a political decision. The elections are looming, I think, in September in New South Wales. And, it's a political ploy by the government of the day to delay the vote because, people of a different political persuasion will get re-elected or elected in the council. That's what he's come out and said. But look, as you say, the context is also the sacking controversially of the CEO, John Ajaka, who fell out with the mayor, Ned Massoon, it must be said, and was sacked on the casting vote of the mayor. And look, for all the CEOs and mayors listening, and look, if you I might add a little bit of dramatic effect to my first day back, folks, or back on here. If the kids are listening, you might want to, if the young kids listening, might want to turn the sound down a little bit. But this, allegedly, Chris and Julie, according to media reports, this is what was said by the CEO to the mayor at the April budget meeting. Allegedly. Shut the up. You are always interrupting me. Stop interrupting me. I'm not sacking anyone and I'm not going anywhere. You're not firing me and I'm not going anywhere. That was said allegedly by the CEO to the mayor. Of course, some short time subsequently, he was sacked.
I'm not sure how we go about putting an expletive warning on this. This is the first. This is the first for
JLF. You've got some work to do there. But can you? You've both been CEOs, Chris and Julie. You've not. Can you imagine addressing your mayor in such terms?
Never. Would never even contemplate speaking to an elected official in such a way.
In a public meeting.
Yeah.
Never.
Was it a public meeting or was that a behind closed? Was that a public meeting or a behind closed doors meeting? I've got a feeling that might have been in a behind closed doors.
April budget meeting. Certainly. Yeah. Imagine the presence of multiple councillors and staff.
There's been
it's an allegation, but it's been widely reported.
It has.
In the media.
It has. I'm going to put the pronunciation down to jet lag, Tony. It's Ned Manoon, not Med Massoon. He's described this report as a shopping list of unfounded allegations. You might expect that sort of response, seeing as he's in the firing line here. He's been, it's alleged to have been interfering in development applications along with other councillors. They're denying those claims. This concerned me, though, a quote from the report that says, there is a strong likelihood of additional issues affecting the operations of the council that are yet to be identified. And I think that's the crux of why they're thinking, right, this public inquiry now needs to really dig into everything that's allegedly and potentially been happening at the City of Liverpool. Ross Glover has been appointed as the commissioner to undertake the inquiry, and if the council gets suspended, as appears likely, probably next week we'll hear about that, an interim administrator will be appointed to perform the functions of the governing body. And new reports this week out of the ABC suggest that at least 5 of the current councillors are in favour of the suspension and the further investigation to get to the bottom of those issues. Big news in local government circles. All right. Thank you, Tony. You've shocked us there a little bit this morning. But we'll get over that. Here's another controversy out of New South Wales. This was at Port Macquarie Hastings, where the mayor there, Peter Pinson, put forward a notice of motion to change the Acknowledgement of Country. Now, what appears to have been happening here is the mayor has been informally at events for quite some time, recognising traditional owners, but also using that traditional acknowledgement to recognise migrants and to recognise veterans. And she put forward a notice of motion to formalise that. Well, it's certainly set a cat amongst the pigeons. It's led to what she's described as some vitriolic feedback, and she's pulled that notice of motion ahead of the meeting that I think was due to be held there last night. Tony, thoughts?
Yeah, look, I think it's ultimately landed in the right place. Of course, our migrant community, our veterans are very important, and we ought to be, remembering them and recognising their contributions. But Acknowledgement of Country has a particular meaning to our, particular First Nations peoples, and understandably, they in particular felt that this was, inappropriate. It was moving in on something that was particularly addressed towards them and their reality. So yeah, let's see how that plays out at Port Macquarie Hastings. And I'm gonna, I don't know the ins and outs. I'm going to assume the best intent by the mayor here, and that in the face of feedback, she has reconsidered and announced her withdrawal.
Interesting dynamic at that council for some time, where there was a resignation, I think last year, so quite some months, that left the council evenly balanced, and a decision not to fill the position ahead of the elections in September. And there's been a number of uses of the casting vote by the mayor at that council. So controversy there, nothing new. Let's head overseas. For Julie, we always like to put in a UK story for you. This one caught my eye out of Yorkshire, where they've received a report on the number of complaints against councillors in the past year. Some ridiculous amount. I think it was 223. And when we say ridiculous, some of the complaints were pretty ridiculous. Get this, Tony and Julie. Somebody made a complaint against a councillor because they refused to sign a get well soon card. Now, surely that's an abuse of the process.
Oh, yes. I don't know. Apparently the allegations were that the meeting was very shouty and sweary as a result of the poor ethicette.
Another shouty and sweary meeting.
In emails.
Sounds like a TGU.
So, yeah, but look, this is North Yorkshire Council, and apparently there is a council standards and governance committee, and they've been struggling to cope with the sheer volume of complaints that have been coming through. You're right, Chris. It was actually 223 complaints regarding the conduct of elected members, and
145
they're struggling to respond. But
well,
anyway,
145 of those, Julie, were judged to be of no merit. But the amount of time that it would take to actually go through all those complaints and make those determinations, surely that's a misuse of resources.
Oh, I know, and there's still 28 complaints that they're having to refer, for further investigation and make sure that the councillors haven't breached their code of conduct. So, so it's quite significant in terms of volume, but they are saying that they're being caused by a small minority of people. So it looks like there's some shenanigans going on over there in Yorkshire by local minority groups, maybe.
Shouty and sweary shenanigans.
Shouty and sweary shenanigans.
I like the alliteration. That could be our episode title. We've just on.
So look, and also too interestingly, they were talking about looking at beefing up security for councillors after concerns were raised by the public, and because there's been threat at open meetings as well. So again, you know, some of the same messages that we're hearing over there to what we've been hearing here and in the US as well, where councillors are under threat.
More councils there in the UK this week revealing their parlous financial state. I notice in reading the news feeds. And the King's speech has occurred this week in Parliament with some positive signs, the sector's saying, for the local government sector. More detail yet to flow through, but there's a real sense of hope that this new Labor government might address some of the concerns that councils have been raising there for some time. We're going to go across to mainland Europe for our final story out of Paris, Tony, where the mayor there has decided to get his feet wet in defence of their River Seine as the Olympics descend.
Yeah, the continental theme, given where I've been. It's actually a lady's the mayor there, the mayor of Paris, Anne Hidalgo is her name. And as you say, she took the plunge into the River Seine in the lead up to the Olympics to prove that this costly cleanup that they've been doing of the river means it's ready for Olympic events. So, you know, going above and beyond in the wetsuit, you know, doing some strides and some backstroke, breaststroke, these sorts of things in the river in front of the cameras. I have a bit of a dream. I have a dream, not quite the Martin Luther King dream, but I have a dream that we'll see a Lord Mayor of Melbourne take the plunge in the Yarra when we've cleaned it up. I wouldn't actually mind, you know, all those millions, billions on a big event if we made the Yarra swimmable again.
Yeah. And now I heard a rumor, and I think I saw something on the news last night, Tony, that after the mayor jumped in Paris, so did one of our swim team from the Australian swim team. So I think that's what I saw. But good on the Australian swim team is saying it's good enough for the mayor, it's good enough for me. So there you go. The Australian spirit coming to life with the emergence of the Paris Olympics, which we're all really excited about.
Very, very brave. Well, I do hope they've cleaned up, because the last time I walked along the Seine, there's no way I would have been jumping in that river. But anyway, that was quite some time ago. All right, so all of those stories making news this week. Julie, a quick plug for a planning-related event that's coming up.
Yeah, that's right, Chris. So the Planning Institute of Australia have got an event coming up on this Thursday, the 25th of July at the Treasury Theatre in Melbourne. It's to discuss the plan for Victoria, the first phase. It's a briefing. It's got some really significant panelists on the briefing. Lisa Ryan, Head of Precinct Planning for Suburban Rail Loop Authority, Jerome Weimar, Deputy Secretary, Housing Statement Implementation, Emily Mottram, who's Executive Director of Activity Centres, and also Lester Townsend, who we all know really well, who's been a planner for a long, long time, who's now the Director of Plan for Victoria. So make sure, councils, that you get a representative along to that one. I know that tickets are selling fast, but I think that would be a really interesting event to get some updates from those senior people.
Okay, that's coming up on Thursday evening of next week. Thanks for telling us about that one, Julie. That's about all we have time for this week on TGU. Tony, before we go,
can I just give a quick plug for one of the regional councils? I'm off on a tour of Campaspe Shire townships with Pauline Gordon, the CEO of Campaspe Shire, next week. We're doing a road trip, Echuca, Gumbawa, Lockington, Rochester, over 2 days, Colbernabon, these sort of places, Kyabram, prospective candidate sessions, telling those people in the community who are thinking, maybe I might put my hand up for council, what's involved, what what we can gain, what we can deliver for our communities. So if you're thinking of putting a hand up for Campaspe Shire, get onto the council website. There's lots of opportunities to have a bit of a friendly chat with the CEO, myself and others in there. And great idea by Campaspe Shire, and one that some councils might consider, some of these giving some information in a face-to-face way to prospective candidates.
Yeah, I think there's quite a bit of that going on across the sector at the moment, Tony. So while you've been sunning yourself in Italy, councils have been working hard to make sure they get a nice balance of new candidates.
Yes, Julie's right. Lots of councils doing lots of sessions. And what I'm hearing, guys, is positive for the number of potential candidates that are coming out of the woodwork this year, as opposed to perhaps last time, which was COVID impacted. But a lot of those smaller councils struggled to get enough candidates, particularly across the border into New South Wales. Things are looking a little more positive this time around, which is good to see.
Yeah.
Okay, that's where we'll draw the line for this week on TGU. Thank you to Hunt & Hunt Lawyers for sponsoring our program. Thank you, Tony. Welcome back, and we'll see next week what the answer is on the facial hair. Julie, thank you, and have a great week. And thank you to our listeners
Chris.
And viewers for joining us every week here on VLGA Connect. We'll see you again very soon.